This is the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Jason, and I am joined by my co-host, Lowell Francis. Hi, Lowell.
Hello. Good to hear from you.
And this is our monthly Hangouts recap episode. We're doing January. And for this episode, we are joined by our special guest, Sherry Stewart. Sherry is a frequent player in the Gauntlet Hangouts community and a contributor to the Play on Target podcast. Sherry, welcome to the Gauntlet podcast.
Thank you, and hello.
So, listeners, we're going to be talking about some of the games we played in January, looking ahead at some of the things on the calendar that we think are exciting for February, and then, of course, doing Giving Me Life. Let's dive right into it. Lowell, how was your January?
Really good. Really good. Off Gauntlet, 13th Age, Blades in the Dark, Godbound, Action Cards, Fellowship, 7th Sea, all kind of ongoing campaigns. On the Gauntlet, had the first chance to do the Gauntlet Quarterly with Mutineer Zero. Did that, and very excited about how that's gone. Did a couple sessions of Unknown Armies, trying that out. Mystery Academy, which is my Masks and New Generation hack. And then Neo Shinobi Vendetta, which is a setting that I did for Fate. And that's going to be the one I actually want to talk about because we had something kind of interesting happen in just the two sessions of that.
Awesome. Tell us all about it.
So Neo Shinobi Vendetta is a setting that I've run face-to-face, and I've also run it at Origins and Gen Con for Games on Demand. And I've used Fate and our Action Cards hack to do it. It has players as enhanced ninjas in a super anime cyberpunk world. They can do all kinds of stuff. They have all these different power sources, like they could be powered by nanites, or they could have cybernetic implants, or they could have a chi field or be psionicists. And it's super, super wish fulfillment-y. You know, the background is kind of this chaotic anime, everything kitchen sink in there. We've got all kinds of clans. We've got cyber samurai. There's villainous zaibatsu. We've got these nano kami gods, robot ogres and monsters. And of course, the grand orbital Mikado overlooking all of it from the sky. The twist is that these ninja clans have been betrayed and perverted from their original roles. They're actually supposed to be good guys. And, as you do in an anime, that the bad guys are actually the good guys. And only the PCs know this. So they're trying to find out who did this and how this happened. And they're operating against it. So it's anime. It's all about action, speed, and being as completely sweet as possible.
Can I ask you real quick about Fate?
Yeah.
It sounds like a really interesting setting. I'm reminded of I can't say it's something, I can't say the pop culture touchstones are things I'm super familiar with, but it definitely sounds like lots of video games I've played. So,
oh yeah.
But I'm curious, what is it about Fate that made it the right choice for this setting? Is it just because Fate's easy to hack or what?
Yeah, I think it's partially that Fate's easy to hack, but also because Fate starts from assumed competency. And so the baseline characters for Fate are all competent in what they're doing, and we build up from there. Whereas a lot of PBTA, you've kind of got some real questions, and usually they're weaker, and even for like a level-based game. So Fate starts me out at a high point, and then I can just step it up from there.
Yeah, I think it depends on the PBTA game, right? Because Dungeon World characters are much more competent than normal D&D characters, right? But yeah, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, but they still have a lot of room to go. There's still, even in Dungeon World, when you do something, you're still like, ooh, I don't know. This is still risky. In Fate, it's less about, am I going to be able to succeed at this action? More, I'm going to succeed, but how much am I willing to spend or push to get that success? How many of my resources am I willing to do that with? And in Neo Shinobi Vendetta, how much am I going to be willing to spend to make myself look even cooler?
Nice. Yeah. It's like you have control as a player of how badass you're going to be. I think that's pretty, you see, I'm thinking of Blades in the Dark right now. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I don't remember where it came up. I want to say it was our Slack, but I'm not sure. But one of the things that kind of unlocked Blades in the Dark for me in my mind was that as the GM, you can go as hard as you want to because the players have all the keys. They have all the tools necessary to push back. Like they can, whether they succumb to it or not is kind of in their hands, right?
Yeah.
That feels really similar to me, what you've just described, like this idea of players having like that agency, that control, right?
Yeah. And I think that that's a really good thing, and something that it took me a number of sessions running Blades in the Dark to get a hold of and realize that was going on, and for the players to grok. But Fate certainly gives you that stuff up front. So I did 2 sessions of this, but a little bit differently. Usually when I do a 2-shot, I do 1 story over 2 sessions. But this I did broken into 2 different missions. So 2.5 hours each session. It's going to be 1 mission. I did our cats thing where I said, okay, this is anime, this is action, this is what we're doing, this is our tone, got all that set up. And for that first session, I said, got them all oriented. Here's who your characters are. Here's the mission. In 5 minutes, blah, 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 blah. Here's what you need to do. In real time, the players have 10 minutes to ask me any questions or ask for any resources. And they can literally ask for anything. That's the assumption, is that they're ninja. They can find out any kind of inside information that they want. They can get anything set up. Like one of them was like, well, what are the 3 best ways in and out? And I was like, blah, 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 blah. And, Rich was trying to trip me up with, well, who wouldn't they want to have invited to this wedding? And I'm like, okay, this person, this person, this person.
Nice, yeah.
And so that was really interesting, because as we got about halfway through, they kind of bought into the ability to just do whatever they wanted. And then we go to the session, and essentially they have to complete the mission by the end of the session. That's their time limit. And it was breakneck, and it was exciting. It was super fast. I cut really, really fast between the characters. For Fraser, who played in it, he was almost shaking with excitement at the start.
I already know where you're going with this, because I've played with Fraser so much. Fraser plays every game of Dungeon.World like Assassin's Creed. Like, his characters are always jumping off the highest thing and doing the most like acrobatic thing, right?
And he said, when they were in the planning stages, he said, I've got this thing I've always wanted to do, like in every game. And so I want to like Halo jump from orbit.
Oh my God, he has tried to get that in games I've run too. And I'm like, Fraser, I don't even know if that makes sense. This is Monster Hearts Fraser. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. And I went, okay, you can do that. And he was like, wait, what? And literally the rest of the group was coming in, like sneaking in, and he was falling from orbit, going through a drone field. He had this thing that he had to turn on when he hit the dome to pass through, to phase through it. But the thing was, the best thing about Fate is I can play into players' egos. So like I could make Fraser pay a lot of points and resources to make himself look cool. If he didn't quite make it as well as he wanted to look really sweet. So it was fun. It was great to get them buying into that. And they completed that mission successfully. They had all kind of bought into their characters. They'd come up with great stuff. But at the end of the session, we did a few minutes of Roses and Thorns. And they were all like, I think that went too fast for us. I think that, it was breakneck. It was exciting. It was tense, but all of them wanted some moments to like have some real character moments with their ninja.
Yeah, I was going to ask that actually. Well, go ahead. Sorry, finish your thought.
And I thought that was really interesting, because in my mind, that hadn't been the thing. And certainly when I've talked about the tone and stuff, and when I've run it at conventions, these are people that are just sitting down for a few minutes. They don't care. They want to be sweet. So it was very interesting to have everybody go, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And yet I would have liked some space to breathe. Like we had one moment where Rich's character had something go bad, and we cut from there very quickly. So his character didn't have a chance to kind of show his reactions to it. And it was hard, because I hadn't quite thought of the game that way. I really hadn't pictured it that way, but it made me go back and look at it and go, okay, how do I get that action and that sense of being awesome and still give them time to show who they are, to do interactions with one another, and to make those choices.
Yeah, that's massively our play culture, right? I mean,
exactly.
Like when I'm running like something like kind of adventurous or action oriented, like say Dungeon World, I often feel like the players are just like going through that so they can get to the camp, right? Like that's the thing they care about more, right? They want to like just talk to each other, right? So yeah, it's a very particular play style, I think.
Yeah. And I think it was very interesting for me to try something that does that and see how it worked, and with good players. I mean, Rich and Michael Barford and Christo and Fraser, a really good team. And so I ended up ditching the scenario that I'd used at conventions for the next mission, and I did something that was much more open and gave them a chance to kind of wander and interact with each other. And boy, that was great.
Nice.
We still got these amazing set piece action bits where like Rich is running his Akira cycle up this, concrete ramp as it's falling, and, people are doing all of this, sweet stuff. They're attacking this laser pachinko parlor and
nice, yeah.
It was still good. And that was a kind of revelation to me to see that game done in one or two shot. We could still have really interesting moments for the characters, especially people who bought in deeply to them. So it's also an example of me. I'm an experienced GM. I think what I'm doing, of coming to the table and having to really turn and adapt.
Yeah.
And having to change things up between sessions, because sometimes things don't work. And that was really fun. That's a great learning experience.
That's awesome. I just have one more question, I guess. I'll let Sherry talk at some point too. Sherry, just jump in there. Is this written down anywhere, Lowell? Like, is this something people can get somewhere? This Neo Shinobi Vendetta?
Well, actually, Fraser was like, I want to buy it now, because he like looked down for it online before we played, because I'd sent some background material. This is just a setting I've written up, but I will be writing it up more fully in some form for people to have, because I think it's a fun, easy conceptual thing to drop characters into.
That's cool. Sherry, do you have any questions for Lowell about this?
I've played this game, and I have to admit, we've talked about this particular run of it, so I feel like anything I say would almost be like, oh, Lowell told me to say this.
I have a feeling that your insights are your own here, Sherry. That's just my sneaking suspicion. But
that game is all about being sweet, but I could see how being sweet and having some moments of pathos would be awesome as well.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you got there with it, Lowell. I mean, or that I think it's great that your players were willing to like be open about that's what they wanted, and not easy to do, right? Because This is something that you were bringing to the table. It was your creation, right? People, I think, are naturally less inclined to criticize, right? Or to like say what they thought could have been better or what they would have preferred. And so I think it's awesome that you guys got there.
Yeah, and I think it is a real illustration of, if you're worried about getting that feedback, it's not going to be easy sometimes. Sometimes it's not going to be great, but it is useful to get that, and I don't do it at the end of every session. I do it usually every other session, and I know you do it a little more informally, and a lot of people use different tactics, but I think it's worth checking in on that.
Yeah, I don't do Roses and Thorns. I do functionally the same thing through a more like kind of like extended sort of like meta conversation about the games I'm running, with the players.
Right.
Because I often like want specific kinds of feedback, and I haven't thought of it until after, like way after the session's over, right? So, but I give myself space to like figure it out like in the week,
Mm-hmm. I want to say this. One of the things is I had really good pre-gens, and the players really made that their own, and it was fun to play, and the second session went very well. However, and I'm going to say this being the person in the Gauntlet who is one of the fate advocates.
You are the fate advocate.
There are a couple other
There are a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of you. I know.
I love a lot about fate. I love aspects. I love the simplicity of stunts. I like the universality of things. I like the ways that you have. These are the things you can do. I love all of that. I fucking hate those dice. I just hate them. And this session, like every time we went to the dice, it kind of felt struggly, and I don't know what it is about that, but I don't like them. It's why we did a different version with our card-based version of Fate.
Well, unpack that a little bit. Like, what is it about the dice? Like, is it just the spread of outcomes, or like what's the particular niggle there? So
you've got either two extremes, which kind of, especially the low extreme, feels really bad. Like, okay, that feels unpleasant. But a lot of the time, because of the way the numbers work, you're just going towards zero.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel like you could just dispense with the dice and say, here's the challenge level. How much do you want to spend to get to that? You could almost do it like,
yeah, I can see that.
Like Avery has done with, I think, Simple World, where people are spending a currency to get successes.
Dream Askew, probably.
Dream Askew, right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the dice don't feel to me in that context like they're adding something. They feel more like an obstacle. They don't feel satisfying to me. And I don't think that's a thing generally to Fate players, but I think it's a thing to how I approach numbers and how I approach success, that it kind of bothers me. And I have to work through that. I have to figure out why that's bugging me so much now.
I think one of the parts, if you look at how you solved it with the cards, is that when there's a roll that has to be manipulated, it's all of a sudden this intrusion of mechanics in a thing that has been flowing so smoothly up until that moment. So whereas the cards is like, oh, I don't like this one, flip another. Now you're going, got to play what resources do I have to bring to it kind of game if you want to succeed.
Yeah.
So there is that kind of stop, drop, roll till you can get what you want.
And it worked in that Reign of Crows, that sort of a Game of Thrones version of Fate I did, because that game was all about resources. And that was baked in, and that's what we were doing, and that's what they were manipulating. In this game, where we wanted to go fast, it represented a speed bump.
I can see that, especially because of the pace of the game. Like the pace of the fiction. Like that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. So cool stuff, and I learned a lot from running it.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, I'm good.
Sherry, how was your January of gaming?
It was an excellent start to 2018, and I hope it keeps on rolling that way. So I got to play 13H, which is a trad game that I just adore. Blades in the Dark, which I learn it a little bit more each session we play, and I've really been enjoying it as we dig into the mechanics and the setting more. Godbound, which is a ton of fun. Fellowship, which I didn't expect to be as lovely as it is, but it's actually delivering a story that was just what it promises to.
I've heard such good things about that game. I need to try it out.
Yeah, and of course Action Cards, which we play homebrew. We just started 7C, so that's exciting. And then for Gauntlet, I got to play in the January series of Mutant Year Zero, and also in the Mystery Academy game that he just talked about, or that he mentioned earlier. So I think the one I want to talk about is Mystery Academy, because this is one of the ones where Lowell did a reskin of masks. And essentially, instead of having superpowers, explicitly knowing what we were doing, we were a bunch of teens that got pulled into a strange place, and each of us have one weird thing that we can do, one weird minor effect. And then we have unleashed power when we get desperate. And essentially, we were playing a sort of weird, academy for the talented. But we get in, and it's, for the students, and it's weird that we're there, and then it gets pretty sinister pretty fast. And it ended up being a game where the tropes were all super teenerific. It was YA tropes from start to end, dangerous adults, each of us destined for greatness, and us against the bad guys, and hijinks galore. It ended up being a really effective game because it was one where we had an open table, and that should have gotten in the way of it. But in fact, I think it added to that sort of feeling of not knowing what was going on, and things kind of coming at you a little faster than you could take in. And so each session, a new person was being introduced, or two new people were being introduced, and then other ones were disappearing, and it was adding to that.
That's a tricky thing about open table. Yeah, it can be that way. Yeah.
But it worked really well for that milieu. I mean, very, very well. There was a little pause every time for character generation, but and that is always a pleasure as well to listen to and to go, ooh, they're making that kid. That was a great idea. And then the ramp up to bringing them in, and then all of a sudden you're off into the hijinks in a way that doesn't make any sense unless you are a teenager again.
Well, can I back you up real quick?
Yeah.
So Masks, the game that it's mechanically based off of, is about, it's like a young justice, teen, young adult superhero thing. Mystery Academy, what's our pop culture reference there? What's something that like is like Mystery Academy, or is there anything?
It's the thing is that I don't know my dystopian novels very well anymore. If Hogwarts were in fact a little bit more sinister and not welcoming, but maybe a little bit more uncertain and difficult, if what you went into was a test or a Gauntlet Academy for all practical purposes, that would be what it is. And I bet that there are some YA novels out there. Maybe Gunner Craig Court is that kind of like that. Yeah. So, which are web comics. So
there's I think an Image Comics series called Morning Glories about kids kind of trapped in a sinister high school, and there are a couple of other comic series like that.
There's a book there's a book that was made into a movie recently, a series of really popular YA books about it's like some kind of school with young people, and there's like supernatural stuff going on, and I can't remember the name of it.
Miss Peregrine's.
And that's it. Miss Peregrine's, whatever. Yeah. Is that one of those two? Well,
it certainly was in the back of my mind. Essentially a school that the kids go to, they don't know why they're there, and when they get there, they find out that it's really, really strange.
And that they are strange too, but now they're finding out there's other people that are strange. So it's both that sort of thing of it's all odd, and then it's also a huge relief because there's other people who are like you. The open table, which is, again, this is one of those things where you hit that and you go, this shouldn't work, and it worked great. It worked because, the Gauntlet players were so awesome. Holy smokes. But the other thing is that Lowell kind of turned it around, and it was completely emergent fiction. Everything that we were doing in it was, we would walk into a new room and it was, what do you see? And someone would say something and off we would go. And it worked because it got brought back in over and over again by the players and by Lowell. And the Mystery Academy ended up being a really cohesive, strange, but in its own way, logical place, if that makes any sense. And it worked well, I think, because Lowell, and I can keep saying, but the GM, put in some structure in there that helped us guide things. Like, for instance, with the staff, he named them all in a particular way. All the staff members were named after the months of the year, and all the instructors were named after the days of the week.
Nice.
Everything that was associated with our class was, it had a green wallpaper or it had a green motif to it. And we got a set of rules that told us what we could and couldn't do. And everything had, it was tied to a color. So if there was a red sash on a door, we weren't supposed to go through. And because we had that little bit of structure, it really let us point ourselves to what was important. Of course, we had to go to the rooms with the red sashes. And, and essentially it was just that sort of really amazing thing to watch some good, thoughtful players work with a minimal set of structure and just whatever they thought was wonderful in the moment, and then watch it all come back around and keep on making sense.
I'm loving that. That sounds so good. One of the things that I find myself, and I'm sure you increasingly have to do it as well, but I find myself having to defend or explain open table play to people, because it's just so different, right? From what, from kind of what people expect in the hobby. And I like to just think of it as a sort of a long con, basically, right? Or something like that. But really, I think that it's not, I don't consider open table play a compromise. I don't consider it better either, but I don't consider it a compromise. I just consider it an opportunity,
right?
And the way it makes you think about your sessions, and the way it makes you think about narrative and the way it makes you think about story. I find it a really good challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And understand that I mostly play, at home, face-to-face games with people that I've been playing with for, 20, 15, 10 years. And those tables have an absolute trust that comes from knowing the other players, that knowing that, I mean, just all of those things, like you could finish their sentences for them, but it's in a good
right,
and fond and happy way, right? And you know what characters they love to play, and you know which things, they're always going to be the shinies they go after. And there's a joy to that, but there's also a joy to being in a game where someone that you've never played with comes up with something and you're like, whoa, and that's great. And then they fit into the thing you're doing and they pick up on it. There's a real pleasure to that sort of improvisation. And even when it doesn't work perfectly, it's still fun to kind of try to put it all back together and make it come around,
Yeah, I agree completely. From the GM side of things, for me, I'm like you, lol. I consider myself a seasoned GM, but I also think that, one of the things that happens in open table play, especially, is if you get a brand new player, first of all, despite how seasoned a GM I am and how many games I run, I get so nervous with brand new players. I'm a ball of nerves with a brand new player. But oftentimes, like, a brand new player is a terrific opportunity to improve your skill set, right? Like, you are suddenly reminded of, like, oh yeah, I have to move spotlight over to this brand new player. Oh, this person's a little more quiet than everybody else because he's new. So I need to work on that. I need to see how to get them involved in the action, right? Yeah, I love all those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you see a player who has maybe some habits that aren't as great for a group dynamic. And as a GM, you can gently work them towards that. And I will say, anytime I've had players that have been like that and we've worked with them, they get better over time. They see what the play culture is and they get stronger.
Yeah, and I think it is sort of striking how strong the play culture is and how communicated it is by the GMs and by the other players. Because, I mean, our at-home group is lovely, but that was years in the making. Whereas in Gauntlet, you're watching people play 3-4 sessions and then they're right in there.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many good players. It makes my eyes tear up because I've met so many good players in Gauntlet, and I'm like, oh, I want to play with him. Oh, he's in there. I want to play with that one. Oh, good. She's there. She's so wonderful. And it's just, it's a real joy.
love hearing this. We're going to have you on every week, Sherry.
Oh, no, okay. I'm a fan of 90% of the Gauntlet players. So.
No, I think it's great. I agree completely. I get so, like, I'm so proud of our play culture and of the people who show up to our games. And I love it when we get new people too, like right now, Jim Crocker, who runs Modern Myths, that game store on the East Coast, he's joined up into Gauntlet Hangouts, and like it's just kind of fun, like to see him like kind of discover our play culture right for the first time. Like it's just really cool because he's a person that I know from outside the Gauntlet, and now he's kind of like involved in it. And I love it. I think it's great. So cool to hear. Well, so Mystery Academy, that's what we came here for. What's going on differently in terms of the mechanics? Like how has it been like kind of scaled or adjusted for this particular setting?
I think that one of the things is because you don't have a sense of what you're capable of, the players and your choices feel very much like you are young teens that don't have any power. And even in Masks, which is meant to be like, yeah, you're a superhero, but you're just a kid superhero, and adults have a lot more power. This kind of even brings that down more. So you're playing with this sort of absolute uncertainty about like, what you can do and will it work, and oh my gosh, who am I anyway? And that worked really well to get that sort of sense in there. I think the other thing that happened is that Lowell's mechanics, he did a little bit more with all of the questioning moves, the seeking moves and things like that you could ask some of the set questions, but you could also ask any question you wanted.
Okay. Yeah.
And he had a move called Seek where if you did really well in it, you could build a fact or ask him to build a fact, essentially about what you were looking into. So one of the nice things is that permission to ask the GM to do some of it if you were like, I want something good, but I don't know what. And so that's nice. It's a nice gift.
That's terrific. This sounds really great. I don't think I have any other questions though. Lowell, did you have any? I mean, I know you were running it, but
yeah, it's interesting because it's Masks and we threw away the playbooks and essentially just went off the basic moves and a couple other little bits. I will say,
you did Wodu Masks basically.
Yes, sort of. My favorite thing I got to do in this is something that when I've run school games before, I absolutely adore. And Sherry asked for this at the start when I said at the beginning, when we did the session, when I said, well, okay, is there anything you guys want to see? And getting the chance to do a classroom scene where I have the teacher do a lecture and it's foreshadowing for what's coming, or it suggests a thing that they can then use later.
Touch. Yeah, that's good.
And so good. It's one of my favorite kinds of scenes, and it's part of why I love the school games, is being able to do that.
I love those. I do that all the time in World of Dungeons, because in all my fantasy games, I usually have like one session or like one major set piece that's before the main adventure. And what I usually do there is I kind of see what happens in that set piece or that encounter or whatever, or that's first session. And then whatever sort of like motifs or visual things or themes came up in it, I reincorporate it into the adventure later, right? It's like my favorite thing to do as a GM, like to, you know.
Yeah, if you're listening to the We Hunt the Keepers, you will see that in those particular sessions
coming up. Yeah. Well, like most recently, I started with the characters at this opera, right? They were at this opera for this big city celebration. This was in the Seclusium game I'm running right now, and it was totally separate from the rest of the adventure. But like basically, I asked the players lots of questions about like this opera, like the story, like tell me the story of this opera, right? Like what's it about? What's happening? Mm-hmm. And now I'm reincorporating all those elements into the actual main adventure. And it's really cool.
So good.
Love all that. Awesome. Well, Sherry, is there anything else you want to say about Mystery Academy Masks?
Yeah, to all the players who played in it, anytime you want to be in any of Lowell's games, just make sure that he tells me you're in there so I can be in the game too. There, that's it.
Awesome. Well, my January was pretty solid. I didn't play nearly as many games as you guys did, but I played 2 different mini campaigns of World of Dungeons. The first was we were running through the old Ravenloft module, I6. That is in support of Fear of a Black Dragon. Mm-hmm. I do my sort of little Wednesday time machine thing to support that. Another World of Dungeons campaign was the one I just mentioned, Seclusium. And that was built using Vincent Baker's The Seclusium of Orphone of the Three Visions, which is a Lamentations product.
I've run that. I really love it. I think it's a great product.
It's fun. It's a great product. It's so good. The thing I'm going to talk about, though, is Crossroads Carnival. So caveat on Crossroads Carnival. This is a really early playtest. I think I might be the first person apart from the author to run it. I'm not 100% on that, but I think so. So just a big caveat on this, what I'm about to say, because the game will probably be really different by the time it goes to publish. But Crossroads Carnival is a game written by our own Kate Bullock. It is about a Dust Bowl era carnival. You play sideshow performers such as the geek, the strong man or strong woman in our case, the mermaid, the snake charmer, that kind of thing. You play those sort of sideshow freak characters, right? The carnival travels from town to town, putting on their show, encountering rubes who are locals who mistrust them and discriminate against them, but who are also sort of succumbing to this darkness. And in a sort of, I don't know, kind of an X-Men type story, the player characters are supernatural characters who are not only they're hated by these rubes, but they also want to save the rubes from the darkness, right? So it's kind of got those themes it's playing with. The game has lots of strong influences from games like Monster Hearts and Urban Shadows in particular, which is no surprise if you know Kate, because she runs those 2 games a lot. Also, a little touch of Monster of the Week, I think, in there as well. It has a darkness stat that the characters can tap into, and so that they can become more overtly supernatural, right? Like, so I am a snake charmer, but if I tap into my darkness stat, I can actually like summon, snakes to my side, right, in a supernatural manner or whatever, right? I can become monstrous, right? So that's one thing there. Very similar to Urban Shadows' corruption feature. There's also a bit of, there's a real focus on like interpersonal drama, on emotion, that kind of thing. And in that way, it feels like Monster Hearts. And I think there's a touch of Monster of the Week in there too, just in the sense that from the text, I think it's supposed to be an episodic game. Mm-hmm. We didn't run it episodic, like you go from town to town. We didn't do it that way, but I think that's maybe how it's supposed to go. It's not totally clear from the Ashcan, but it's pre-Ashcan, mind you, not even Ashcan. So that's Crossroads Carnival. That's what it's about. We played 4 sessions. We did a session 0, and then we played 3 4-hour sessions.
Whoa, that 4-hour sessions. That's
3 4-hour sessions. Yeah, I wanted to get into it. I had a fantastic group of players. Players were so good. I had Dan, my former co-host on this show, David, my current co-host on Discern Realities, Fraser, my co-producer on Pocket Size Play, and who we've talked about a little bit today. And then I had Jennifer, who is not a co-host of anything with me, but who I game with at least twice a week, I think. And so it was a really great group. I mean, just fantastic role-playing, fantastic intimate scenes, emotional scenes. The story was just like HBO level, like storytelling. Like I was just really, really into it. So good. I actually added some like dreamlike qualities to the story that are not in the text of the game, but I was really feeling the setting. And so I actually had like an NPC who was a conjoined fetus twin of the carnival, the leader of the carnival. And that little conjoined person would sort of like sing them into a dream state, right? So they could go hunt monsters in the dream world, right? Just a really great story. So many great elements. As far as the game itself goes, you know, I don't know if this is how it's supposed to go necessarily, but we had like a real nice TikTok, like back and forth between different like sort of phases, kind of like in Night Witches or Mouse Guard. So we would do part of the session in the day with the characters interacting with townsfolk, going on little errands or whatever for the carnival, that kind of thing. And then we would switch to the performance at night. And at night, we would kind of use their performances to sort of like reincorporate what happened earlier in the day and to resolve like certain things, right? And I'm pretty sure that's how Kate intends for it to be. Like the performances are how the characters emotionally affect the rubes, right? It's how they draw them in. It's how they press into the darkness themselves, but also like rescue people from the darkness, if that makes sense. The session 0 stuff in the game is fantastic. Really, really excellent. You basically, it's similar-ish to Monster Heart's setup process where you're just asking lots and lots of questions of each other. The questions that Kate has set up for the characters are terrific, really, really evocative and good. The questions that you ask about the carnival itself, her suggested questions anyway, fantastic. I mean, our session 0 took about 2 hours. Like it was a 2-hour setup process, but it was really, really fun. Like we had great, great fun with it. Just by the end of it, we had such a, I mean, this thing was just breathing on the page. I mean, it was so, so good by the end. So really, really high marks for that part of it. And another thing I really loved about the game, at this point, even at this really, really early stage, Kate's text is so evocative and so good. It was a pleasure to read. Really, really great as far as that goes. I guess the only things that I'd point out mechanically that we kind of had some issues with, and I've brought this up with Kate already, but, and like I said, I'm sure this will all get smoothed out in the final production, but I think the biggest concern we had with the game mechanically was the move triggers are pretty tough. They're very specific, unusual move triggers. And so we sometimes had a tough time, like making sure we were hitting the trigger to get the move off, right? And being honest with that, you know, we sometimes wish there was a kind of act under pressure or keep your cool type move. And there's not, there's kind of one, but it has a really, really specific trigger that doesn't make it like very universally, useful. And so we kind of wish there was something like that. And we also would have liked for there to have been a universal performance move, like you do a performance and then so that means you're doing this one particular move. I don't think that's how she intends for it to be. She intends for you to use your performance as the trigger for other moves.
Okay.
But we had a bit of a time with it. I mean, it was, you know, I think maybe with practice we'd get better at that, but those were all fairly minor complaints. Overall, the game worked pretty well.
Yeah, I find with a game, particularly when you're orienting yourself to PBTA, an act like under pressure is like, it feels so right. And then as you play it for a while, sometimes you go, oh, wait, no, I really just need to go to this when that's happening. So there's always an orientation thing with a really good, tightly written PBTA game.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you know, this is probably wider scope than necessary for this conversation, but one of the things I think is really interesting about Powered by the Apocalypse games, from at least a theory standpoint, is you kind of have essentially like 3 levels of move, right? And each of those levels has increasing fictional specificity to it, right? Your basic moves are the moves that everyone can trigger, and they cover a wide variety of situations, right? And so you're going to rely on those most often, probably more than 75% of the time, right? And then you have the playbook moves where it gets a little bit more fictionally specific, right? And then you can go one level even deeper with custom moves, right? A custom move is super fictionally specific. It's like, this is the GM of this game, of this particular session, who has this really fictionally specific thing he wants to highlight. And so, we have this custom move for it. And I think understanding those 3 different levels of specificity is really key to writing good PBTA moves. What do you think, Lowell? And Sherry, do you have that right?
I'd agree. We had some interesting bits in the Mystery Academy game when we talked about what moves worked or didn't work. And it was that I had really done a very light reskinning. And in that conversation, we could see, okay, this is how we could move this to that level of specificity, how we could change these to make this fit. We need to have in the moves these things that say something about the kind of game we're playing much more specifically.
Yeah, and I find that the thing is that when you're creating or putting together a hack, you have to find those things. But for me, since I don't live and breathe PBTA, I have to play the game for a while before I understand when those things hit and when it feels right and what I have to lean to get it to work the way my head works. I have heavy duty trad sense of I do this thing and this thing because that's how you do it. And PBTA is so deep into the genre, and sometimes that's how you learn a genre, is playing that game.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
That genre emulation is a big deal, right? I mean, and it really is, it's a paradox, right? Like, because on the one hand, I think that Powered by the Apocalypse games have a looseness, they have a wide ranginess to as far as the narrative goes, as far as like how you can play it, right? Like you have a lot of input as a player, and the world is kind of just being created as we go in a lot of cases. But then on the other hand, the playbooks are really specific, right? Like they are designed to like do a really specific thing. And if you try to go outside those boundaries, it doesn't always work right, But Crossroads was great. It's still really early in development. She's got a long way to go in that game as far as the text goes, and I know there's lots of like additional parts that she's adding to it that I've gotten to take a glimpse at, like as far as like monster rules and things like that, which I didn't get to use any of that stuff, but it's coming. But in this early stage, though, we had a great time. I don't know how much of that was up to the group that I had. I know that was a big part of it. And also, I've just recently finished American Horror Story Freak Show.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really like in my mind, right? But all that said, I mean, Kate's text definitely gets you in the right headspace, and the Session Zero stuff especially gets you like really like raring to go for it. So yeah, really, really good stuff.
I do want to say one thing. I think it's so cool that you did an early draft of a game from Kate, and it kind of plays into, I did this Mystery Academy Masks, and it was something I put on the calendar, and then I came up with it, and I did a few rules, and I did it. I love the Gauntlet, and it's a great space for throwing stuff out there and trying it out. I see a lot of people going, oh, well, should I run this, or should I do this? I'm thinking about doing that, but I want to get it right. No. It's never going to get done until you get it to the table and try it. And sometimes it's not going to work. It's going to fail. It's not going to work. But you're going to learn from that. You just got to get it to the table. I'm not a brave person, but I think I'm pretty brave about this. We try it out. It didn't work. We'll do something else. And we still have a good time, and we learned something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I hadn't done it, if we hadn't gotten it to the table, we wouldn't have gotten it. We wouldn't even see anything of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. And we're a good space for just like, for trying things out, just because we all kind of have each other's back, right? I mean, So awesome. Well, I don't have anything else I want to say about Crossroads. Let's go take a look at February. Okay, so we're each going to highlight something on the calendar in February, the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar, that we think looks pretty cool, whether we're playing it or not, just to kind of give some shout outs to folks in our community. Lowell, what do you have to shout out to?
So Michael Barford, both in January and in February, has used World of Shadows, which is a voodoo hack of shadow.
Wosha,
we call it
Wosha.
World of Dungeons. He's doing it on Sunday evenings, and he's doing kind of a project that seems to me parallel to what Fear of a Black Dragon is doing, the OSR things being done with another system. He's going back to classic Shadowrun modules and settings, and he's running them with this World of Shadows. And I'm not a Shadowrun savant, but he's picking out stuff that I saw on the shelves and I thought was cool. Like he did Bug City in January, and in February he's doing Renraku Arcology. I think it's so cool. And in fact, I've seen him post about that he's learned a lot from doing it in January and that it's going to shape how he goes to do it in February. And that's so cool, being able to re-engage and do those old modules and bring them into a new approach.
Yeah, I love that. I should probably have him. I should have him go on Fear of Black Dragon and talk to Tom about Bug Study. That'd be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Sherry, what looks good on the calendar?
Okay, so Yoshi Krillman is running 3 sessions of Fall of Magic. Now, first, Yoshi Krillman is absolutely swoon-worthy. I mean, he's just
so true.
He's the most gracious, thoughtful, charming human being. So just in that, you're going to have a good experience. But Fall of Magic is like this crazy, beautiful game. It's, a big scroll that you unroll as you play the game, and the story goes from there. And the characters are all these very, very simple archetypes that you build into yourself. And the thing that's kind of really neat about this, that online gaming is really a good place, is that Roll20 has tools for this, and that's what Yoshi is using, that you can have this sort of beautiful experience even online. And I think that's really exciting and really awesome. And then even nicer is Yoshi, when he's setting up the series, he says, here's the sort of thing we'll do if I have the same players in all 3 sessions, and if we don't, we're going to adapt these ways. I mean, it's already, again, the open table's always planned for.
Awesome.
And I think just really neat.
I love it. I'm actually looking at Kat Ramen's playtest of her game Red Carnations on a Black Grave. She's running 6 4-hour sessions on Gauntlet Hangouts. These are playtest sessions. The game is a one-shot, so it's 6 different games. It's really great though. She's getting like lots of different people. There's like so many between all 6 sessions. There's a ton of different people getting to play this game. So I know she's going to get awesome feedback on it. First of all, Kat is amazing. I play games with her and hang out with her at the Double Exposure Cons in New Jersey, and she's just a really, really awesome person. I got to play Monster Year 1244 with her. That was the first time I met her, and that was the first time I played Monster Year 1244 as well. Great game. Her game, Red Carnations on a Black Grave, is a story game in the same vein as Monster Year 1244. So what you do in this game is you are playing members of the Paris Commune, which was a radical socialist revolutionary group that controlled Paris for 2 months in 1871. And you play out, there's a dozen characters to choose from, and they're all interlocked in different ways. And you play out these 2 months of the Paris Commune. I am led to believe it is a very heart-wrenching, emotional game. And so that's really, really, that's catnip for me.
Oh,
see what I did there?
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that's really great. She says in her game description that it's inspired by games like Monster Year 1244 and Witch: The Road to Lindisfarne, 2 games I love. So yeah, that looks pretty great. And I'm in one of those. I get to play in one of the February ones.
Oh, nice.
Let's go to Giving Me Life. Hi, listeners. 2 things I want to tell you about today. First, we are giving away 3 softcover copies of Emily Care Boss's game, The Romance Trilogy, in February. For a chance to win one, all you have to do is follow us on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. Our Twitter followers will be entered into drawings taking place on February 14th, 21st, and 28th. And we're doing these Twitter drawings all year, so be sure to follow us at Gauntlet RPG. The second thing I want to tell you about is the new issue of Codex. It's called Codex Blood 2, and it will be in our Patreon feed through February. It is the best issue of Codex yet. Here's what's inside. Dia de los Muertos, which are procedures for a 4-session gaming event involving the final girl and choose your own adventure. 5 more blood-soaked magic items for Dungeon World. The Croatoa, a dark and intense OSR scenario. Our newest Gauntlet daddy, Fang Bang, and 3 dozen cult horror movies. To get access to Codex Blood 2, just make a $4 pledge on the Gauntlet Patreon by February 28th. As a bonus, you'll also get the original Codex Blood. So go to patreon.com/gauntlet and check it out. Thanks. It's Giving Me Life. Lowell, what's giving you life?
I'm getting ready for February. I'm running Hearts of Wulin, which is a PBTA wushu game. And I've been listening to Jianghu Hustle, which is a podcast about wuxia, martial arts, films, and gaming. It's part of the Misdirected Mark podcast. They've got about 6 episodes out. Eric Farmer and Eli Kurtz hosted. It is super smart. Super smart. I love their analysis of the movies they're looking at. And I love the way that at the end they bring it together with some gaming concepts for taking on a very specific genre.
Cool.
and thinking about games. So good. Just, if you like that genre at all, I recommend going and listening to that podcast.
Awesome. Sherry, what's giving you life?
So, I don't know why, but this person that I live with, my husband, he decided that this year, and particularly early on during the winter, he's going to work out how to make the perfect bowl of ramen. So I call it the Great Ramen Experiment of 2018. So we've sort of launched into this pretty wholeheartedly. We bought some nice ramen noodles, and we have all the umami ingredients like the Japanese wine and mirin and misos of all different kinds, and we've made these soft-boiled eggs that you marinate in the tari, and so the first few bowls have been pretty good, but each one gets better than the other, and it's kind of like really fun experimentation in the kitchen for a delicious bowl of soup, which is just perfect in the winter.
Fantastic. For me, I'm just continuing my love affair with a Nintendo Switch. I love my Switch so much. I play that sucker all the time. It has totally transformed like my relationship to video games. And the Switch has become a really great home for indie games, actually, like little, kind of smaller indie games. So many good indie games coming to it. Right now I'm playing SteamWorld Dig 2, which has been on the system since the beginning, but I'm just now getting into it. Fantastic little kind of combination between a Metroidvania and Dig Dug, but it's pretty fantastic. And also a point-and-click adventure game called Oxenfree, which is it's a story. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin it for anybody who's playing, but it's a story about a bunch of kids who are like on this camping trip, and supernatural things ensue, slathered with a beautiful synthwave soundtrack, which I love. So yeah, indie games on the Switch are giving me life.
Neat.
And listeners, that's our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we can be found on G+, on the community section of G+. Just go to the community section and search for the Gauntlet. You will find us there. We have a website. It's gauntlet-rpg.com, where you'll be able to find links to all of our other shows, and our various things we do, like Gauntlet Hangouts and the Codex scene and all that stuff. We're on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. The Gauntlet Twitter is hopping right now, so go follow us on Twitter, because Twitter is a thing that I am doing full steam ahead this year. And we're on Patreon at patreon.com/Gauntlet. Lowell, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Sherry, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, thanks for listening. Take care.